All right, the recording started. We should probably get the call going.
Whenever you're ready.
Phil, all right. Welcome, everybody, to the June conference call. Thanks for coming on. So my name is Zach Smith. I am an assistant to Jim Hallbeisen, the Director of Research at Growers. And I'll be hosting and also speaking on this call. So the outline of the call will be as follows. Jim Hallbeisen will be starting us off with some current events. And then Mike Bulcher and Phil Neal are going to come on, and they're going to talk about the featured picture in the June picture in the calendar, which is of wine grapes grown at Huber's Winery. It's in southern Indiana, a very, very nice place and a nice operation. Unfortunately, they couldn't be on. Mike Bulcher is their district manager, and Phil Neal is growing some grapes himself with the Growers program, and so he'll be able to fill us in a bit on that. Following that, I will be talking about soil microbes. I'm no expert, but I've been doing some research myself and writing a series on them in our educational solution, our sales letter. And so we'll be giving an overview of some of them, or some of the types, I guess you could say, and an overview of their function in the soil and how they work. Excuse me. All right. So if you have any questions, please save it until we ask. To unmute yourself is *6. And the only other thing I want to bring up before we get started is that Growers has begun to do some podcasts. They're available on I think most or all of the podcast apps. I'm not too familiar with podcasts myself, but today the second one was released, or today or yesterday, the second one was released. They're going through Dr. Tejan's book, More Food from Soil Science, reading portions of it and then discussing it. So considering that that book kind of lays the groundwork for the program and all of the research and experience that Dr. Tejan's had prior to Growers and even a little bit after, it's a good resource, I think, to listen to. So with that said, Jim, if you'd like to start us off, please, and then we'll move into Mike and Phil and then into my portion.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Zach. Just to comment a little bit on the podcasts, I do an interview on these podcasts. As he said, one discusses, we're going through the chapters of More Food and how it relates to today's agriculture. And then we also did a podcast discussing environmental issues, and I'll talk a little bit about that tonight with this dicamba ruling by the Ninth Circuit. I think farmers need to take a close look at that and its effect on regulation, particularly from nutrient management standpoint, because it definitely is related to that. And the Ninth Circuit right now has not stopped just with dicamba. The Enlist 3 is now being observed by the Ninth Circuit, and basically they wanted to stop all application of dicamba. They haven't ruled on the E3 yet, the Enlist product, but the number of acres of beans that will be affected are monumental. Now the states, through EPA, have kind of end-run this thing, but they've skipped over regulation as far as EPA is concerned, have gone directly to the courts. So this changes the whole aspect as far as agriculture is concerned. I think the first current event we talk a little bit about is they had the WASED report today. Again, it was not a huge changer. The government's manipulating the numbers, trying to keep this volume high to try to control the price. They're bouncing around with usage. Of course, the ethanol usage is way down because of the COVID problem. But we see gas prices starting to recover as Russia and Saudi Arabia have backed off on production. But again, the government is still using that, and they're holding this weapon over our head that we've got a fantastic crop out there. Now, our reports from the field, particularly Iowa and Illinois, are a little bit different than what the government is talking about. Our guys are saying there's a fair amount of replanting that's gone out there. some of their contacts, guys have replanted 50% of their corn crop, and in some cases 70% of their bean crop. Now, that's not everyone everywhere in the state, but they pulled the trigger too early. They held back a little bit, but this later cold snap had a significant influence on emergence, and so there has been a fair amount of replanting going on. The government will never recognize that. In fact, they just talked about the problems they had in North Dakota last year, and that's basically how they control that. When there's a disappearance of acres, they come in the next year and add that or detract that from the actual production numbers. That way they can keep control of where the volume is at, and the traders basically will stay in that. They'll stay range bound so that the price doesn't get out of control. So again, there was nothing monumental other than that the prices held pretty good. Corn went up a little bit with the Dow Jones dropping almost 2,000 points. It was pretty interesting that commodities, agricultural commodities, hung in there pretty good today. So I think that says a little bit about what might be happening out there in the field. The other thing is several of our guys have contacted us about these milk prices and how they've escalated here in the last 7 to 10 days. Some guys are saying they were at $12.50, $12.75, and now they're over $20. So again, some of our guys believe there's price manipulation that goes along with that. Other people are saying cheese price didn't double, but it went up significantly. And then the use of fluid is looking like it's changing a little bit or significantly, because as people are staying home to eat rather than going to restaurants, the consumption of milk has seemed to go up. Most people, they get in a restaurant, it's iced tea or soda pop or whatever, and now at home they're trying to be a little more health conscious with their family, and milk seems to be coming back to the forefront. So again, hopefully that'll keep the legs under this thing for a while. Some of our guys are saying that they hope that that's the case, that we can hold with that. The other issue, again, as I mentioned before, is the Ninth Circuit out of California ruled that the EPA did not grant the registration to Monsanto or Bayer for the dicamba, and that included two of the other major companies correctly. So they basically put a halt on the registration itself. First, a lot of the manufacturers were pulling the dicamba back in, or they were asking the farmers that prepaid to come and pick it up because they didn't want it on hand, because the ruling basically said no sale, no application. Now, two states are adhering to that. Illinois and I think Wisconsin are the two that are adhering to that. The other states have basically put a stay on that and are allowing people to use the dicamba that's on hand. The plaintiffs in that case are screaming bloody murder that EPA is just end running the courts at this point. So I'm sure they're gonna be back in court with that. And right now, the Ninth Circuit is looking at the E3 or the Enlist product, which is the 2,4-D product, and basically using the same arguments against it. The registration wasn't quite as argumentative, so they don't have the same things to work with the E3. So the ruling there has not come down. But again, the number of acres that are falling under these two compounds is monumental. And the way guys are using it, it could be very problematic. Now, with most of the states allowing it to be sprayed, that's helped immensely. They've got cutoff dates on dicamba where they haven't with the E3, their list product. So again, the thing that I want farmers to think about with that is we've talked about looking at the growers program from the nutrient application standpoint, that everything, particularly like in the Lake Erie Basin or the Gulf of Mexico or the Chesapeake, has all been on voluntary basis, encouragement for farmers to follow certain practices to alleviate the amount of nutrient running into the water systems. And particularly in the Lake Erie situation, it hasn't made any difference whatsoever. In fact, it's gotten significantly worse in some cases, particularly when you have a wet spring. So the city of Toledo right now, they tried to sue the farmers in the watershed. That was thrown out. So now they've turned to the court system, and the approach that was used on dicamba and enlist, I think that'll be in the gun sights of somebody, like the city of Toledo, which would include other municipalities in both the Gulf of Mexico and Chesapeake Bay. And so again, with the court's ruling, the idea that they can limit fertilizer usage is a big possibility. And my discussion with farmers is most guys think that'll never happen, but if it does happen, you've got to have some options. And see, right now, guys are scrambling around trying to figure out how they're going to replace dicamba. And see, the same thing will be true if you're cut back on your fertility allowances. How are you going to be able to approach that? And we think we can help you quite significantly with that. And most guys said they'll never monitor it. Well, it'll be very, very simple. You just won't get crop insurance if you can't prove that the purchases match up with what your actual fertility applications are. I mean, the government knows everything about your acreages because you voluntarily have given that to get the insurance. And so they've really got the carrot. You have nothing to deal with at this point. So the implementation through the legal system would be pretty easy. So again, we're saying we think we can help you significantly with that when we start discussing how much nutrient you actually need to grow a crop. We think we can help you cut that back significantly. Just have to tinker with it and see how it fits in your operation. The last thing that I'd like to talk a little bit about is the annual meeting, the annual sales meeting we have in December, and then the winter meetings that we have with the district managers, around the country. The next sales letter, there was a survey done by AgWeb, and what they did was ask farmers how comfortable they were with face-to-face meetings. And the results were kind of interesting. Many farmers are a little militant about the COVID thing, that it's not that big an issue, it's a government thing and that type of issue. But the survey was a little bit revealing that way. And so I'm saying to our sales force, you guys have to talk to the customers or the potential customers and see, what their real feelings are. We felt we've built this business with, human contact, one-on-one. They know us, we know them. But again, with the situation we're in now around the country, it's a little bit different situation. So I'd like to talk to guys about how their customers feel and how we want to approach this thing. Our first issue is going to be the annual sales meeting in December, how we're going to handle that. Russ and Rick are thrashing that around, trying to come to some idea, and we need input from the sales force. So as you guys are thinking about this, talk to your guys and see, how they feel to give us some idea of how we want to approach this thing. Again, the tech people are saying, we got Zoom, man, we got Microsoft and the Teams thing and all this high technology. But my experience has been face-to-face, pressing the flesh is how farmers really like to talk business. And we'd like to continue that, but we want the farmers to be very comfortable with this. We don't want to force ourselves on them if they're not comfortable with it. If guys are comfortable, we certainly would like to continue on doing the things that we're doing. So I think it's up to our sales force to really get a handle on that and help us understand what guys' comfort zones are with that. And, I'll be talking to you, but that's something we got to start thinking about. 2021 is not that far away. And so I realize that if we get a vaccine, a lot of guys are saying they aren't going to participate in the vaccination, and that I don't have a problem with that. I'm just saying that it appears that there's a little more concern out there. We've actually had feedback from people that are immunocompromised. They're in a whole different situation than people that aren't in that particular situation. So again, you don't always know where the particular individual is at. So I think you need to be chatting about that and trying to get a handle on it to help us approach this correctly and do the job right. So at that point, I think, Zach, I'll turn it back over to you, and you guys can run with it at that point. So I just say to the sales force, give me feedback so I know what's going on out there.
All right, thanks, Jim. We'll move it over then to Mike and Phil. First, before we get started, Phil, if you're on the line, could you speak up and maybe press *6 in case you're muted?
Yeah, I'm online. Do you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you, Phil. Good to hear you. Okay, great. In that case, so Mike Bulcher is a district manager with the company. He lives in central western Ohio. Phil Neal is a salesman and a customer. Well, they both use the product and the program, and he is more southwest Ohio. So, Mike, I thought that given that it's Huber's picture, if you would want to explain that a little bit and how the whole operation got started there, because they're a pretty impressive one, and then we can move into with Phil as well.
Yeah, sure. I thought you was going to have me talk about grapes. I'm no expert on grapes.
Apparently Phil's the expert here, so.
Well, I went over there whenever he got a year or two after he got started, and he was, some of the things he told me I thought were pretty interesting. That's one of the reasons I asked him to come on tonight. I think he'll do a pretty good job of maybe guiding you through some things of what not to do. But the Hubers down there, the pitchers don't do the place justice of the operation. It's quite an operation down there. It's a family-run business. They're like 5-6 generations ago started. I mean, they've been at this a while. And when it came over here, and I couldn't tell you exactly where it is they come from. I want to say France, but they've been doing wines and wineries since they've come over here. Another one's orchards. And they do a fair share of produce also. They're a very well-managed operation. They have everybody in the families. I mean, there's cousins and things that work there that all have a hand in, like, either marketing or running, like, their produce market. They have an ice cream shop. They have a winery. They have the Starlight Distillery. And like a restaurant, a tasting loft there. It's a very, very well managed, and it's a very high class place. I mean, it's a nice place. So, Zach, you guys was there with me last winter. You know kind of a little bit what it's like there. It's just pretty impressive.
Oh, yeah. It's awesome.
And they got, I want to say, roughly around 600 acres of orchard and winery there, and it's not all grapes. I'm not exactly sure on, the amount of, like, grapes versus apples, and then they have peaches and things like that. They sell everything in the store that they raise, including the wines, and they do some bourbons and different things down there. That part of the country, they have this bourbon trail thing that runs all over the state of Kentucky, and Huber's actually one of them. It got some legislation passed in the state of Indiana to make and serve whiskey or bourbons to be part of that bourbon trail thing. So they've spent some time in the State Department actually getting some laws changed down there to be part of that. So it's a first-class operation. They got tours that they do as well. You can go down there and tour. They have a petting zoo, but interesting enough, they I don't want to say they got in trouble, but they used to have live animals at their petting zoo, and because animal rights and things of this nature, I guess they went to more the, I want to say, the fake animals down there now, because just to try to make some of the people happy that they were dealing with that way. But anyway, one of the things that Jim was talking about I thought was interesting. We're talking about grapes, but that operations down there in the Hubers is down there in Floyd and Clark County, about right on the county line. And something else they did was they actually got a bunch of growers together down there, and I'm pretty sure they got the dicamba 2,4-D thing banned in that area, because grapes are very, very sensitive to them products, them chemicals. And it wasn't just Hubers. I know there were some other growers as well. There's a fair amount of produce grown down there, and of course these orchards and wineries. They were very concerned about this when it was coming around, because anybody that has grapes knows that 2,4-D, especially when that's sprayed, that stuff, them grapes can pick that up from a mile or two away, maybe 5 miles, I don't know. And, you know, they're up on a hill, and some of it's down in some low ground and valleys and stuff like that, and that stuff has a way of traveling. So, yeah, it's concerning for that part of the business to be in the produce or orchard and grapes with, you know, something like 2,4-D. So I don't have a lot to talk about grapes. Everybody I've dealt with that are foliar feeding grapes generally, they do some root dipping as far as the 100-to-1 mixture and then dipping the roots in there and planting them. I've got a few people doing that. And then spraying these grape plants, everybody I talk to says that if they spray them for the first time, they can almost see right away the grapes react in a very positive way to the growers being sprayed on them. A few things the Hubers have told me over the years with spraying the grapes is they like to spray early on, and I think they start like in March spraying these grapes, and they spray just about weekly. And up until they really start getting the foliage to come on, and then they kind of back off a little bit, because something else that this does for grapes, and I've noticed it even with the couple grapes I have, is the plants really tend to start growing foliage. I mean, they'll really fill out quick. They'll really start growing some big old fat leaves. And I didn't really know this up until about a year or so ago, but they tell me that that's a big problem for powdery mildew or downy mildew that they get in them grapes, that they get all this foliage on them, and it's hard to get this fungicide to penetrate the canopy. So that's one of the reasons why they spray early on and then back off later, and then they spray a little bit through the summer just to try to get some size and increase the sugar. Increasing the sugar was something they seen with the growers that has impressed them over the years, whether it's sweet wines or dry wines. The sugar content is very important to them, that they have a good sugar content in them grapes, because it gives them better quality wine as well as the grape. You know, as far as getting the natural sugar versus supplementing sugar, they get better quality wine with the higher sugar in the grapes. So that's really all I know, you know, with the grapes, unless there might be a question that you have to ask me. But I talked to Phil a couple of years ago, it's probably been now, and he started a little vineyard there at his place, and I was kind of interested to see how that was coming along. And I was in the neighborhood Oh, it's been maybe a couple springs ago, and I stopped in and talked to him, and he got to talking about his experience of growing them grapes, and I was pretty impressed because, anytime somebody knows what they're doing, usually the experience is the best teacher, I always feel. So I'm going to kind of turn this thing over to Phil and let him talk about what he's all seen growing grapes, and maybe he can help a few people shed some light on some of the problems he had. So, Phil?
Yes, sir.
You
know, guys when hear me all right?
There,
Yeah, I can hear you, Phil.
All right. Well, I started this project when my daughter asked if we could grow some grapes. I said, sure. And I didn't know she just meant just 2 or 3 vines, so I put a half acre out. So that's been about 7 years ago, and it's been a battle ever since day one. Basically, the only thing I got going for me is I remember I was talking to Joe Henry about the grapes from France and how the longevity is based on the high calcium in the soils. And then Ed Bulcher was saying, well, you need to like 30-ton rate to the acre high cal lime on your grapes, or you're just not going to make it. So that's where we started. 30 ton to the acre on, a half acre is not a lot of money or a lot of lime. It's just what we put on there. And then we had all different grapes. We got 5 different varieties, and they're all French type varieties, I guess. I don't even know the names of them. I just know I go out and take care of them. I got a cheat sheet someplace because I really don't care. I'm just trying to get them to grow. And I've had every problem you can imagine because I just would try something, and you got to wait each season to iron it out. So last year was total devastation. Somehow or another, somewhere, I got chemical damage, either being a Banville or dicamba or 2,4-D or both, and I lost a lot of grapes. Now, when I noticed all that happening, and I produced no fruit at all last year, when I noticed all that happening, I just kept foliar feeding every week with growers, trying to save the mature plants and hope maybe I'll get some saplings come out of the root package and I can start over. So anyway, let's look at the grapes are growing on a single wire because I have an issue of bending over and trying to bend down and do all this, work upside down like. So it's 5.5 foot up in the air, and the goal is to bring a cane or 2 canes up and go, in my situation, north and south on that. And so far, that's kind of working. We run into powdery mildew, just tore us up. And I found a product which tomorrow will be my 3rd application of the fungicide. And that product's name is Rally. And it comes in a throw bag, which it's like 2 ounces to the acre, so it doesn't take much. And then I use let me see here, I got my notes. I use for insects, of course, you've got the Japanese beetle. This is the time that they're going to start coming out. And I use a product called Danitol. What I like about it has a staying power of about 20 to 25 days. So you're not out there every week, every 5 days, whatever, spraying whatever, mouth eye on warrior, whatever. And that takes care of that pretty good. And then the other weed control, we're using a Surfland, which I think acts like Prowl, and using Liberty to burn everything back. And Liberty works a lot better than Roundup because if you get the Roundup in there, you'll probably kill the vines. I don't know how many of them I probably killed doing it that way. The other problems we run into is, of course, I have vines every 10 feet, and I got a lot of blanks, so we go out in the spring and we'd prune them back, and then I'd replant the canes. Now, I didn't put them in grower's water, but I did put them in a root inhibitor, a powder, and if I put 50 of them down, I might get 5 to take because I have no irrigation out there. So this year, I just said to heck with that. So what I'm doing now is is kind of, if I get a vine, it's got a lot of length on it, I just bring it down and set it in the ground and start a new plant, and that's how we're going to fill the blanks in. I'm not going to do any more canes and transplant and all that because the success is just about zero, and it's a lot of work to do it that way. So anyway, we got pruning them back early this spring in March, and the disease was so bad that there's just a lot of, we tried to find some green tissue pruning back, and we found some, and it's coming, but I got a lot of foliage, and here's what we've done that's different from last year. Matt Gooding and I got together, and we started using RO water. And I'm going to tell you something with this RO water. We're down to 4 ounces for a half acre. And I can spray that one morning and come back the next day, and I got leaves already coming out, and they're the size of $50 overnight. Phenomenal results by using that. And the same way when it comes to the fungicide, it's going to work better. Insecticide, I'll know because that's tomorrow's program. The weed control is just, I've got a lot of problems with thistles now. I mean, that's a Roundup situation, and I'm not comfortable using anything on them except maybe a mower or pull them or whatever until we get into the dormant stage. Then you can spray them puppies in the dormant stage and it won't hurt the grapes. So pruning wise, when Mike was over there, I was just whacking the daylights. I just cut them things back to nothing because that's kind of what I wanted to do. Well, that wasn't the right thing to do. So now I've learned that we cut them back, leave a lot more out there to let it grow. And it's kind of neat. I was able to purchase when I was down at the Louisville Farm Show, I purchased a pair of battery-operated shears, and I can prune that plant back and just lickety-split. But we try to leave on the top wire, anything sticking up. We got green there. We just prune it back just straight across like a flat-top haircut, and that's where all the grapes and stuff, they're all starting to push out that way. And over time, because of weight, they'll just curve right back down. They'll be right in front of my face, and hopefully there'll be grapes there this year. Now, I have a lot of nice sets on a lot of the grapes. The older plants, they're doing well, but I got newer saplings coming out of the old plants. Of course, there's no grapes on that. They got to start over. So it's been a learning curve. The goal is just try to get the whole thing full of grapes, all 320 plants or whatever the number is. We're trying to get all of them established. I don't have any intentions of becoming a winemaker or a juice maker. If anybody wants grapes, we just give them away. I got one guy that's a vineyard. He says once we get all the problems ironed out, he'd be more than glad to come over and take them off our hand, and that's fine because whatever. But the whole goal is maybe a grandkid or something will want to make a project out of that, and then they can sell the grapes or sell the juice, or lo and behold, they want to make the wine, they can do that too. But it is pretty good therapy for me out there. We stand out there in the sunlight and beautiful days and prune away, and that's what we do. Additioning putting that RO water in there is going to be a really interesting treat this year to see what happens and how things are different, because before, the water I had before has enough dissolved solids in it that even though you acidify the water or do whatever you want with growers, it just never had the response like it did this year with the growers with RO water. So that's going to be the big thing this year. Maybe things will work a lot better. I haven't seen any powdery mildew on anything yet. I haven't seen any bugs yet, but June is the time you start spraying for your Japanese beetle, and you got to get ahead of the game. So I figured that out. That's if you get behind, you just can't do much about saving it. The other thing I learned is if you want to grow grapes, not vegetation. And I've learned that once you get the grape pods are set, they're all set, they're not going to put any more on, then what we do, and I tried this last year on some things that was working pretty good on a couple of vines, you come out about a foot and a half away of that last grape pod hanging down, you just whack him off. And then you just let it go because he doesn't need all that extra leaves out there because you want to grow grapes, not leaves. So that'll be in the program here probably another 3 weeks or 2 weeks when everything gets set up and they get filling out, and that's when you whack them back. And I've had guys tell me they've used what do they call them? Oh, gee whiz. Weed trimmers, weed whackers on it, Yeah, just they're just trimming back. And it seems they do that, but I'm going to go out and do it by hand because that way I can control more. I don't want to lose any more grapes. So, and then I haven't had much problem with a deer or birds, so that hasn't been an issue yet. But if I start growing good grapes, then that might become an issue. We did have one year. I had a neighbor guy who he grows grapes, and he picked a whole bunch of them and made me a bottle. He made a lot of wine, but I got a bottle of it, and I still have it, and I haven't drank it. It's a blonde-colored wine, and I know what it's going to taste like. It's going to be delicious, but I don't drink wine. So this whole thing was just a project to be doing something because, farming is tough enough. This will toughen you up if you don't know what you're doing. And believe me, I have no clue. I don't know what I'm doing today is right or wrong. I really don't. I just keep trying different things. When things start working, I say, we'll put that in the good column. When things don't work, we don't do that anymore. So that's kind of how I approach it. And it's been 7 years, and I thought for sure by now I'd have a half acre of just wonderful grapes growing. Well, when you don't know what you're doing, then it takes a little longer. So that's about it in a nutshell.
Hey, Phil, this is Jim Hallbison.
Yeah.
Hey,
yeah.
Matt Gooding, are you on? Can you talk, Matt? Well,
Hit star
Phil,
six, Matt.
I'd like you to comment a little bit, Phil, about the RO water. And when you and Matt conversed, if you had used rainwater, do you think you'd have the same kind of response as you're having with the RO water, or do you have any opinion on that?
Well, I don't know at all about that. I know Mike uses rainwater on some of his sprays, but this dissolved solid stuff, I'm telling you, let me tell you a little experiment happened in my little garden plot this year with RO water. I have all these 2.5-gallon jugs left over. Now they're all triple rinsed out with well water, and I filled up with RO water, put 1 ounce or 2 ounces of growers in each one of the 2.5-gallon jugs, and I dug my holes for my tomatoes, and I just, a little bit of lime, a little bit of water, put the tomatoes in, and every one of my tomatoes are curled up like a 2,4-D Banville damage. Why is that? Well, gee whiz, I guess that grower's phosphorus and RO water come together to make the best cleaner you ever see in the world. So now you're putting RO water in these sprayers. I got a big 1,000-gallon sprayer, so now what we're going to do, if I just finish the field and I have Roundup in there, we're spraying, and then I want to go to something else that's not a Roundup GMO crop, man, and I use RO water in there, that's going to pull all that out and put it on that crop and hurt it or injure it. Now, I know that happened because I was spraying around my house with a 2,4-D product early on, and I wanted to spray around the house, the flower beds and stuff, because, I have a boom sprayer. I don't drive the best, and I wanted to make sure I didn't kill all the flowers and stuff. So about halfway around the house was okay. The other half browned out 2.5, 3 foot along the whole edge of that around that house. Where'd that come from? Well, that RO water released all that stuff right out of that hose. So and I talked to Matt about that, and he goes, yeah, buddy, you got to be careful with that. I said, well, thanks for telling me, and just, but that's what happened, and I don't know if the rainwater would be any good or not. It'd be a lot cheaper maybe, but I have a constant supply. I can keep filling my tank up. We put in a 2,500-gallon tank, and it's 800 gallon a day. It takes a couple of days to fill it, but I'm not in no big hurry because I don't have a lot of acres that need sprayed all at once. So
right.
I think it's got promise. I'm really excited about using the growers on soybeans and corn and everything else by itself. Just doing a foliar wrap, just see if I can push those grapes at that little dinky rate that I got. Well, my gosh, what am I going to do with the beans and corn I got out here? I don't know. And the pods I got on the grape sets and stuff, they're just beautiful. They're nice. Hell, they're 2.5 inches long already. They just started podding about 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. We'll see. But I'm
Yeah,
also
Matt's on.
Pardon me?
Yeah. Did you hear the question that I asked Phil, Matt?
Yes, yeah, about the RO water and what has happened with him. Yeah,
Well, the versus the rainwater, and I wanted your opinion on
yeah,
that.
yeah, and I got some different studies about that. We're going to be doing all sorts of different things on different waters, and we get a stand of beans here shortly. We just got them out the other day. We're going to be being able to show you kind of visually the differences, and I also have a couple theories of what's the difference between RO and rainwater. You know, on a TDS scale, they both would show basically zero. But there's some other things that I'm starting to recognize, and I want to come up with different ways of being able to kind of show it both, you know, through on something biologically, and then also got an idea from a physical point of view, a kind of a mechanical point of view, to kind of show there is a little bit of difference there that we don't realize. Unfortunately, I think one of the biggest things, and I won't be able to say that, and I'll say it's only pure theory, but I think we are getting a lot of volatilized different chemicals that go in the air on roofs of the buildings that rainwater is being collected from. I think we all know at night how dews settle on metal surfaces and everything, and I think you know, you get a recurrent a bunch of them, and then a rainfall comes. I know it was mentioned by one of the water people out here that we converse with, that they see significantly higher chemical residues in rainwater in storage facilities because of that. And that's the theory that that's where that is coming from. It kind of concentrates it, and you can kind of think about it and kind of see maybe why that is. You know, and so I don't know how to work around that. I might have a testing operation that we can prove that theory or not here shortly, and know that that's one of the differences. But it's going to cost us a little bit. So that's something we'll all work on and figure it out. But yeah, what Phil's seeing there, I mean, yeah, there's stories abounding doing this, and I think a lot of it has to do with you know, you do not have any dissolved solids in this, or that's very low from these machines, the TDS. Rainwater, I mean, I know Zach's sitting out there, and I think we tested his one time, and I think it was 60 TDS. You know, so what is it picking up off the roof and in the organic matter? You know, that could be a negative in some situations. Others it won't. You know, why did somebody put a charcoal filter on their rainwater supply, go into their house and flipped it over, and his wife got out of the shower, you know, that night and said, "What did you do to the water?" You know, "My hair's softer." You know, well, it's rainwater. It was just run through a charcoal. There's stuff going on here that we still have to figure out. No question.
Now, those chemicals on the roof, Matt, do these water guys? That's just straight from volatilization into the atmosphere after guys are spraying, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And
I really agree with that. I've had several people tell me here this last year that they were getting green scum on like their ponds, and even, you know, like say mud puddles, but areas where water collects, where there's no Roundup or anything like phosphorus even being used in that area. And you know what Matt's saying there is kind of interesting, because I think that there's more of that happening out here than anybody realizes.
Yeah, that's correct.
I think the RO water gives you a definite control of your water. In other words, you're making it that level of purity, and there's no other interference. That's one less thing to be, you know, in the puddle of mixes to screw things up, and that's why I think to me it's a little more expensive, but still it gives you a clean product, and that's what I'm striving for.
Sure.
I don't need any more interference with stuff.
Thanks, man.
Kind of changing the subject a little bit, but I've got several calls this week, people calling and really raving about the antifreeze deal with their, you know, when we had this really cold weather, they were spraying their trees and produce and stuff, and I've got several of them now that think they really fared a whole lot better than some of their neighbors who don't use growers. So
yeah, no. Yeah, that's permeate. We're getting a lot of feedback. We've got a guy down southwestern Indiana. He's got a guy that finally, bit the bullet and followed him more closely than he had been in the past, and he's just totally happy. There's almost an area total wipeout down there, and he's sticking out like a sore thumb. So I think that what Mike's talking about is been very significant this year in certain areas.
actually, the one guy that called me told me, "You guys don't talk enough about that." He goes, "You need to talk more about that because it's somebody that hadn't used growers in a while that had it there and decided to try and give it a try there when the temperature got down to 25, and they're real happy they did now."
Good. Excellent.
So, and the only other thing I really wanted to talk about was we're starting to get very, very, very dry down here, and it's a pretty big area because of talking to guys an hour away in Indiana to the north that's telling me they're the same way. You guys having that up there?
Yeah, no, that's gone up into Minnesota. Right now, the epicenter of that thing is like Oklahoma, Kansas. They've got some areas down in there that the harvest is going on. One of our guys from North Dakota runs one of those harvest crews, and that'll be very interesting. He said some places the wheat seem to make it, but there's other areas they're quite concerned about it, and that thing's starting to spread to the north. And our guys in Minnesota, they've seen some very dry weather up there. So if that keeps moving to the east, I think foliar feeding is going to be something that guys should be really thinking about right now and getting prepared for.
I agree. The plant doesn't take it in quite at the same level it does whenever it's moving through the season normally. Mm-hmm. Over the years when we had dry weather, we always cut the rate back and did it a little bit more often. I mean, that's maybe a time thing with some people, but we always noticed that going in with the smaller rates and doing it a couple more times really paid off for what you got back.
Yep.
That's all I got.
All right. Thanks, Mike and Phil. That was great.
Thank you.
I think I'll... Pardon? Oh.
I just said
I'll open up Thanks, Phil. I'll open up the floor to questions now. We're running a little short on time. I'll probably give a brief introduction to the microbes, but I'll have to save the deeper stuff for another call. So if you have any questions, it's *6 to unmute yourself. I'll give a minute. All right, no questions. Okay, so as I said before, I am not an expert at all on soil microbes. I've just been doing some research on my own. But they are a very important aspect of crop production, and one that I think amongst the many aspects of crop production are probably the least understood. But their importance can't be overstated. The research that is happening now is showing that they are pretty vital to most areas of crop health, of plant life, whether that be germination, nutrient uptake, water uptake, pathogen defense, even altering their environment to better suit them. Their relationships with these microbes in the soil are very important to all of those things. So the 5 big groups, are bacteria, fungi, which are the 2 biggest, nematodes, protozoa, and actinomycetes. I'm not going to get into all 5 of those right now just for lack of time, but I'll do a little bit on bacteria and fungi and give a brief explanation of kind of how I think we, or you as farmers and we as people in ag industry, should be viewing these. So basically, bacteria are more numerous in agricultural soils than fungi, where fungi are more numerous in uncultivated soils, especially forests, than bacteria. And there are numerous reasons for that, but the biggest one is the type of organic matter, like dead material, that is available. So in a forest, a lot of the dead material is tough lignin or cellulose. So we're looking at like trees, woody material, very difficult to break down. The bonds between the carbon in the lignin or cellulose are very stable, very strong. Most bacteria are not very good at breaking those down. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of bacteria still present in forest soils, but not to the same ratio as fungi. Fungi, because of their structure, meaning they can form chains. They're called mycelium, and this is so if you pick up a big clod of dirt and there's a bunch of little white, they almost look like roots in them. That's the mycelium. That's fungi growth. So it's made up of many, many different cells, and that's how they can travel throughout the soil, so to speak. But they can also get into small holes in. Let's say you have a woody stem from a plant that dies, fall to the ground. The bacteria can't get into that plant through the cellulose walls, but the fungi can get in through little holes with this mycelium because they're actually able to travel. Bacteria are largely immobile in the soil. They can get in, and then they can release enzymes that slowly break those things down. So in a forest setting where you have a lot more of that tough to break down plant material, fungi thrives. In cultivated soil, agricultural soil, it's usually the opposite. The organic matter that's there is easily broken down. We're talking non-woody plants, obviously corn, soybeans, whatever the case may be. And so bacteria thrive a lot better with that. They are more efficient at breaking those simple bonds. That covers basically the decomposer types of both bacteria and fungi, and I would argue those are the most numerous and important for nutrient cycles, for ecosystem health. Without them, there would just be dead matter piling up everywhere. And so they're kind of an engine that keeps it going. I'm not going to get much more into them right now, but I'd like to go over two important facts that I discussed in the May sales letter and on a recent podcast that we did. And that is that that microbes in the soil are in a complex ecosystem, food web relationship as any other ecosystem, be that the ocean, a forest, a lake, a river, savanna, doesn't matter. We need to view it that way. So what that means is that it's not a system, first of all, obviously we understand it very little, but it's not a system that we can easily manhandle to get our desired results. And it's not necessarily safe to do that either. So the two facts that I highlight in my sales letter article, are one, that the populations in the soil should be stable, which means that there's no immediate threat to their existence, but they shouldn't be static. And static means that something remains the same over time. So these populations will naturally change. You'll get different species or types becoming more common or more numerous, and then they'll die off, just like a regular ecosystem. Best example in another ecosystem is the old fox and rabbit cycle. So you have foxes and rabbits. Obviously, the foxes eat the rabbits. Well, the rabbit population increases, and that destroys a lot of vegetation. But then, because there's a greater food source, the fox population increases. Because of the fox population, the rabbit population decreases. The fox population increases, the rabbit population decreases, which means there are too few rabbits to feed the fox population. So starvation reduces the fox population, allowing the rabbit population to bounce back. It's a cycle that goes on in most ecosystems, including the soil, where there are all kinds of different relationships going on. We're talking symbiotic relationships, mutualistic, predatorial, parasitic. They all have relationships with each other that keep different populations in check, and they certainly have relationships with any plants that are growing there. The same kind of relationships. So in agriculture, what we usually focus on are the symbiotic relationships, and that's where we'll take bacteria for example. Bacteria and the plant receive benefits from each other. So the most common example is that you have the rhizosphere, which is a small area around the roots that the plant will release root exudate, which is a sugary substance, into the soil. Well, sugar is carbohydrate, carbon. So the microbes love that. It's very easy to break down, hence bacteria are very numerous in that zone. And in return, the bacteria will break down organic matter, other nutrients that then they can then make available to the plant. They can, in nitrogen or legumes, they can form a nitrogen fixing relationship with the plant where they can actually fix atmospheric nitrogen and make it available to the crop. You even have them signaling when a pathogen or an unknown microbe is traveling toward the plant, and that can activate the plant's defenses in time to prevent it from actually infecting it. Fungi can form many of these same relationships. I would argue that as far as the nutrient transfer goes, fungi would be more suited to it because of the filaments, the mycelium that they can form, can actually transport nutrients from further away from the rhizosphere to the rhizosphere, whereas bacteria are very limited in their movement. They're very small. They have, aside from water movement, they have no real way of actually moving outside of their immediate area, whereas because fungi can form these filaments, they are able to transport nutrients and water from areas further away. That sums up what I wanted to cover tonight. Sorry, the second point, I never got into that. The second point, I guess I talked about it a little bit, is how important the relationships are between these different populations. And the really thing I want to hammer on there is that we can't expect to add in a single species or type of bacteria, say, and always get the desired effect, because we're completely upending the relationships that already exist there. I will get into that point more in a future call because it's very important, but we're about out of time now. That's fine. I'm happy that the conversation went well with Mike and Phil and Jim. So thank you guys for coming on. I appreciate it. And the next call is going to be, on July 9th at 10 p.m. Eastern Time again. Look forward to hearing from everybody listening in during that time. And thanks for listening in tonight. Have a good night. Bye.